Good morning. In today's video, I'll discuss an incredible statement on India's foreign policy made by External Affairs Minister Jaishankar, who recently said that the Nehru model failed and we, that is the Modi government, are trying to correct it since 2014 when the government came to power. Now, let's examine his statement. Now, the Nehru model, which he says failed, happened 60 years ago. That is the time the world was different. It was a bipolar world. The Cold War was going on, and both the big powers in the bipolar world, they were playing the zero-sum game. The entire focus of the world was on America or on Europe. As far as India in Asia Pacific was concerned, it was fringe, it was regional. It was really of no great concern to the two big powers or the two big blocs. In such a situation, for the Prime Minister Nehru, to come up with the exceptional vision of a non-alignment policy was something great that needs to be celebrated. But of course, I congratulate Jaishankar for the deft transformation of a diplomat to a hardcore Sanghi that he has become. That he calls this a failed model. It wasn't failed. It was very relevant, but I'm not here to discuss the Nehru model. Let's talk of the corrections that Jaishankar is talking about, starting 2014. If you see 2014, when Prime Minister Modi came to power, something exceptional happened that the government and the Indian military should have taken note of. And that is, the Pentagon came up with their third offset strategy, specifically targeting the People's Liberation Army of China. Why? Because it was felt in the Pentagon between 2010 and 2012 that the PLA was at par in capabilities and war concepts to the US military, and something needed to be done by the Pentagon to offset that par and to be ahead of the PLA. So a big thing, third offset strategy, which was about artificial intelligence and autonomy. Now this concerns us. It should have concerned us because we have a border dispute with China. And PLA had become so big. But the government was not bothered about that because in October of 2014, the Prime Minister, while addressing the Combined Commanders Conference, gave his directive to the military commanders, and that was through the sentence saying that the threat may be known but the enemy may be invisible, implying that threat is Pakistan, enemy is terrorism. So the role of the Indian military in counter-terror operation was formalized by the Modi government, something the Indian military in any case had been doing since 1991. So this was their task allocated by the Prime Minister. Now, let's talk of the multipolar world, the present time that Jaishankar is talking about. Let's understand that before we see what corrections he has made, and we'll consider those. Now, technically, in 2017, when the Trump administration was in office, experts say, because Trump started with the trade war on Huawei against China. So 2017 is that cutoff year when the world, which was unipolar, that means there was only one superpower, America, it became multipolar. So now, after 2017, we all agree that the world is multipolar. So there are many poles. There are many poles which are exerting their status, their pressure. Now think a little deeply about a multipolar world. If there are many poles and everybody was thinking of a zero-sum game, wouldn't the world be unstable in perpetuity? But actually it will not be. This is the good news. Because today 80% of the world does not see the multipolar world as a zero-sum game. It is only 20% of the population of the world that sees it that way. I will come to that in a little while. But before that, let me give out four distinctive features of the multipolar world that we talk about. The first is that instead of one great power which was there in the unipolar world, today we have three great powers. And they are America, China, and Russia. When we say a great power, we are talking of three things, three attributes. The first is a great power has a capability to influence events anywhere in the world. That's a great power. Second is there is no nation which can coerce or force a great power to change its policies or actions. And the third is that a great power by itself can look after its sovereignty, which is its territorial integrity, as well as its security. That means its interest and people anywhere in the world. That's a great power. So we have three. Now the second feature of the multipolar world is that the whole focus of the globe, the global geopolitics, the global environment, which was there or fixated on transatlantic, has shifted to Asia Pacific, which is our region, for two reasons. One is the rise of China, and the second is the rise of the emerging markets and developing countries. These are those countries which used to be called the third world countries during the Cold War, when the world was bipolar. And the interesting thing about the rise of these two is that they are actually dependent on one another. Let me explain this. This year, that is 2024, IMF report says that of the 20 fastest growing economies in the world, 9 are from the African continent, which is demographically young, which is aspirational. So 9 are there. And in 2023, the combined trade of China with the 54 nations of the African continent was $290 billion. China was the largest trading partner of the African continent. And this will obviously go up. What this means is that there is a dependence on one another. Implication of this I will come to in a while. That means the developing countries, they look up to China for help, for development help, for prosperity. And we know that is through its BRI, and there are also other things that it has come up with, which is GDI, which is Global Development Initiative, Global Security Initiative, and Global Civilization Initiative. But I'll come to that in a while. Now, so what had happened was that because of the shift that happened, and because of these reasons, anything happening in India and Asia Pacific now has a global implication. So what Jaishankar was talking about, Nehruvian foreign policy, please remember that was happening when we were a fringe. Anything happening was regional in our environment. Today, anything happening here is global. It has global implication. What that means is that all the three great powers that I spoke about, they are competing, contesting here in Asia Pacific. So our action has global implications. Now, let me get to the third attribute, which is the good news. That actually between the three great powers, they have two global governance models. As I said, one model is led by America, which is 20% of the world, what we call the global north nations, the industrialized nations of the West, and of course industrialized nations in Asia Pacific also, like Japan, like South Korea. They all are part of North Korea, of the global north. They believe in balance of power politics, and for them security is a zero-sum game, which is why the American analysts and their policymakers and their politicians, they talk of a new Cold War has happened. But this is not the way 80% of the world thinks today of the multipolar world. These are those countries which are developing countries, what used to be the third world countries during the Cold War. Now, as far as they are concerned, they get the support from two great powers. I said support, not leaders. Nobody is a leader because this group believes in sovereignty, sovereign equality of states. It's important. And they believe in indivisible security. So these two leaders, the great powers, which is China and Russia, their visions of connectivity, development, prosperity, they are aligned. So what they are offering as a group, what group can accomplish is development and prosperity through connectivity. So this is where the global south, all these countries are gravitating. Now, coming to India, as I said, that India, anything happening here is global. Why? Because all the three great powers today want India. America wants India, global north wants India to be a military bulwark against China in the Indian Ocean region. China and Russia, of the other group that looks at development, the development model, they want India to strengthen BRICS, of which India is a founding member, so that the global geopolitics stabilizes faster. So when S.jaishankar says that we are friends with all, everybody wants us, it is because of global geopolitics. It is not something that the government has done to make this happen. So we must be honest in what this is about, because we have something to offer to all the people. We have a geography. India has the largest coastline of any country in the Asia Pacific region. Then we have a huge military which is disciplined. I'm not saying professional, which the Americans want. Then we have a huge market which everybody wants. America wants, China wants, Russia wants, and the other Western countries which are there part of the global north, they want. So the long and short is, this is a unique opportunity for India to make the most of things. So we'll talk about this correction that he talks about, whether it is a correct correction or not made by the Modi government, a little later. But before that, the fourth attribute that I spoke about, that is that coincidentally, there is a technology shift also happening, which is pushing the global governance, the global geopolitics to greater stability. This is what will bring stability to the global geopolitics. And the unique thing or the exceptional thing about this technology shift is that unlike the first and the second industrial revolutions, where the gap between them was 100 years, the third and the fourth are back to back. The third is about digital. The third industrial revolution is about digitization. And the fourth industrial revolution is about interplay of physical, digital and biological domains through what we call the artificial intelligence and emerging technologies. So the question is, how will stability come in global geopolitics? Now, if you look ahead, you can do a bit of crystal gazing. And that tells you that, look, perhaps by 2030, there will come a situation where, after all, there are two great powers which are competing with one another in the fourth industrial revolution, and they are America and they are China, and they are neck to neck. In fact, I would argue that China is ahead because of its new productive forces strategy. In certain areas, it has gone ahead, and in artificial intelligence, it is neck to neck because the Chinese are very good in applications of artificial intelligence, better than the Americans. So what we are perhaps looking at is that all these global south nations that I spoke about, who are aspirational, who want development, who don't have a zero-sum mentality, who want prosperity, they would, in addition to connectivity and the physical infrastructure which China has built in 150 countries out of 193 in the world through the Belt and Road Initiative, obviously they would want the next step also to happen after the physical connectivity, and that is the cyberspace hardware and software connectivity, which is about the third industrial revolution and the fourth industrial revolution. This is how prosperity will come. So there is a greater chance that if India also stabilizes, India is a developing country. We have 800 million people by government's admission who are very poor, who are dependent on government dole money for their food. So if India, a developing country, a very prominent country of global south, was to join the global south grouping and strengthen BRICS and strengthen other institutions of the global south, then we would see global geopolitics stabilizing faster. But with this as the understanding of what this multipolar world looks like, let us come to Jaishankar's corrections that he has made. Well, the start point of that obviously has to be 15th of June 2020 when the Galwan killing happened, which was extremely unfortunate. What happened there? And that, of course, with time more we will come to know about that. But it seems to me at times in hindsight that perhaps it provided the right opportunity to the Modi government to fast forward the various agreements that it did with America. If you see the number of agreements that have been done by the Modi government between 2020, end of 2020 and 2024, they are mind-boggling. They are basically about supply chains, cyberspace. They are about becoming part of the Indo-Pacific Command Defense Network. I mean, that's a subject by itself which can be discussed. So basically, India is dependent. India is basically helping the Americans in their strategy. And this is expansive. But if you look at the statements of Jaishankar, they are to the contrary. He recently said that in India, we are players of consequence and we should have a grand strategy. Wow. Now, grand strategy is a term used by the Americans. But I am not surprised, because why not in foreign policy if our military leadership also picks up all the terminologies from the West, notwithstanding the fact that our problem is with the PLA. They should be focusing on their terminology and trying to understand that, but this is a different subject. So we need a grand strategy. Grand strategy is the first attribute that I spoke about a great power has, a capability to influence events anywhere in the world. So that is what India should have now, Jaishankar believes. So as part of that, let me talk of three distinctive things that he occasionally refers in all the talks that he gives. And one is he talks of an extended neighborhood, and he says that the Act East policy of the Modi government, which was initiated in 2014, has been vindicated by the Indo-Pacific strategy being part of that of the Americans. That means now we are looking at an extended neighborhood. Our foreign policy is not confined to the neighborhood. I mean, he talks of neighborhood first, but I'll discuss that in a while. But the gains that we are getting, according to him, are really in the extended neighborhood that is going towards the east, towards Japan, and then also linking up with the West, which is West Asia, where he talks about IUU2 and he talks about India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. So that is linking up with the West. He talks about all that. This is one part. Second, because since he sees India today, or he projects India as a great power, so India has, for the first time, a over the horizon policy where India is now making its presence in the Latin American countries and in the Pacific Islands. And the third thing is about G20. Very interesting. Now, G20 happened in 2023. In January of 2023, in a virtual format, India did what is called the Voice of Global South Summit, where 100 countries of the Global South, in a virtual mode, a summit was held by India. And India collected their ideas and brought in, and few of those ideas, they were brought in the Delhi Declaration, which was signed during the G20 summit in October of 2023. I mean, nobody would have objections in helping the global South nations in the G20, whether it was the industrialized nations or the other group, the developing nations, which are there in G20. And because of that, India also takes the credit, and no harm in taking that credit, that we brought the AU, the African Union, as the 21st member of the G20. See, keep in mind the fact that today, of the 54 countries in African continent, on the African continent, 41 are on board BRI. Please keep that in mind. So it is good that you did this. But as a consequence of this, India did 2 more virtual summits with the global South nations. That was after our term of G20 was over. They were done one was done in November of 2023 and the other was done in August of 2024. And after that, Jaishankar has declared that we are the leaders of the global South and we can be a bridge now between the global North, with which we are very friendly, the bridge between global North and the global South. Obviously, with a colonial zero mindset, Jaishankar failed to realize that as far as the global South is concerned, they do not believe in a leader. As I said, it is a collection of states which believes in theory of equality, sovereign equality of states. They don't need a leader. And has somebody told Jaishankar, any of the nations of the global South, that you please be our bridge to the global North? In fact, they are vetoing global North every day. The Americans and the Western nations, whether it is on Ukraine or it is in the Middle East. They do this, they are there at the United Nations opposing whatever they do. So, but he says that we want to do that. And the reason for that is that India has taken a decision. And the decision is that we are competing with China. It is born more out of jealousy that how can a country which started sometimes along with us, we became independent in 47, the Communist Party came to power in 49, and today they become a great power. We don't accept that. So this is the problem. And the problem is that the gap between the national power of India and China is so huge that if India was to cooperate with China, which is what at one stage Modi had agreed with Xi Jinping. You see, at the 2018 Wuhan informal summit that the Chinese keep referring to, there Xi Jinping had proposed the idea of China-India Plus, that China and India work together and help the poor countries, the smaller countries, with connectivity and prosperity. And that is the time the Modi government accepted the proposal. Obviously, what they had in mind was the 2019 general elections. And obviously, the Wuhan summit was held because the worry was that in 2017, Doklam crisis had happened. It should not escalate and create problems for the Modi government in the 2019 general election. But nothing came out of that. So the best cause when you have such a huge gap in national power of the two countries is not to have normal ties at all and project, not to have normal ties with China, but project to the people of India that you are in competition. But the problem is that you can't hide these things. What is going on? So as far as normalization of relations with China are concerned, it is completely ruled out during the Modi government. It's a subject by itself, which I can tackle later. Now, if you see what's happening on the ground, you see our neighborhood South Asia, except for Bhutan and India, all the other countries in the neighborhood, they have signed the BRI. All of them, they have signed. So it is good for India, good for those small countries that today India sees still itself as a zero-sum mentality. It sees as the big boss, the big daddy of South Asia because it is the biggest country here in South Asia. But as far as the small countries are concerned, it is good for them because they can derive the benefit both from India as well as China. But for the Indian media to say, for example, recently, the Sri Lankan president was here, that the first visit happened here, he did not go to China. It's meaningless. Please keep in mind that the Chinese strategic shadow looms large over South Asia because all these countries have signed the BRI, and as far as national power is concerned, what they can give is much more than India can give. India has to accept this reality. But India is refusing, the government is refusing to accept this reality. We are converting their grants into, waivers, money is being given, which is good. We should help the neighbors. But don't see the whole thing as a zero-sum game because times have changed. This is the point that needs to be made. Now, next is, we don't have normal relations with China. But if you see that this year's bilateral trade between India and China, that stands at $118 billion, and it is China is today, if you see the figures, the largest trading partner of India, slightly more than America. Then if you see the figures of the last 5 years, the cumulative figures that have come out, there is a debt of $334 billion on India, and this is the amount which is in favor of China. Then recently there was this Niti Aayog report. Niti Aayog is the government's top think tank, and they were talking about this, how much this China plus strategy has been successful. China plus is basically that the countries, the West, they are trying to reroute the supply chains from China, which of course is not possible. And the beneficiaries of that, it was thought would be India, but instead, according to the Niti Aayog, the beneficiaries of that have been countries like Cambodia, Vietnam, Malaysia. They have benefited. And the reasons are political reason, bureaucratic reason, and structural problems. So India has to resolve that. India has to see that when you look at national power at a time, when global geopolitics is shifting, then you look at hard power. You don't say that the era of war is over. It isn't over because there is so much of turbulence in the world we see every day. How is the era of war over? So if you see the hard power, which comprises of 3 elements, the economic power, the military power, the technology power, we are actually nowhere close to China. We have to accept this reality. But we are refusing to accept this because S.jaishankar says that India rise will happen amongst instability and volatility. And he's referring, and he says, to the terrorism from Pakistan and to the 2 borders which are live. Please tell me, does it logically make sense for a country like India, huge country, for it to rise amongst volatility and instability? And we have our think tanks are track to completely backing the track 1, the government policy on this. See, it is not about what S.jaishankar is trying to do. Project image of India, project image of the Prime Minister, which is good. He is the Prime Minister of India. But it is about how to help the poor people of this country, 800 million poor people of this country. So this change that he is talking about, this change does not benefit them. What will benefit them? Let me just give out 5 things. What should be of value? Now think of a situation where we cooperate with China, we have good relations with Russia, we identify ourselves more closely instead of saying we have a multi-aligned policy, we are with everybody. Small countries can say that. Not a country which has a responsibility of 1.4 billion people. You cannot say I have a multi-aligned policy, I can be with the West, I can be with non-West. No. Because why? Because, as I said, there is a technology shift also happening. All these countries of our neighborhood which are on board BRI will eventually end up with Chinese standards in the emerging technologies, and there will be problems of interoperability in e-commerce, even with our neighbors, perhaps by 2030. Are we looking ahead? Are we seeing that situation? No. So, we are a developing country. Think of a situation where we normalize relations with China, we have good relations with Russia, and we strengthen the institutions, we strengthen G20. This development model does not say that we won't strengthen G20 or we won't strengthen the Bretton Woods institutions created by America. They say everything needs to be done. But we should identify ourselves where we belong. If we were to do that, see what happens. There will be peace on borders. We will have peace on the line of control with Pakistan, with line of control with China. Now, when you have peace, and that means the deterrence can be created and the war fighting capabilities can be created. They also will not happen in present times that the Indian military leadership keeps talking about. So we need peace for development. As I just said, I gave out some figures about the trade which is going on. There is so much more. It is for us to see how it is win-win. And we should look at win-win. We don't have to follow what the Chinese tell us. But certainly there are certain things we can do with China together which will help our people. So you have peace on borders. You have time for development. Then the Kashmir issue is a big issue, where physically it is with us, with Pakistan, with China. Today China is sitting in East Ladakh. Now it's all fine to say it is integrated, but actually it isn't. It will be integrated in my assessment when two things will happen. One is that India really has the courage to remove Armed Forces Special Powers Act from Jammu and Kashmir. Remove it and bring our forces back. So many forces we have put in the this counter-terror operation in their grids. That will when things will normalize. Second, they will normalize when the law and order is with the democratic elected chief minister and not with the lieutenant governor of the union territory. So even this, once there is peace on the borders, then we can talk and the solution will come, because after all, it was Xi Jinping who in October 2019, when he came for the second informal summit with Modi in Chennai, in Mahabalipuram, he spoke to Modi about the triangular peace, the peace between China, Pakistan and India. And that is where the solution of Kashmir also lies. We should look at that. Next, if we were to be part of this grouping where we belong, we know what is going on in Middle East. Middle East, it's a war zone. It will only get worse. Now, if we were to bring stability to this group with so many attributes, we can be a leading supporter of this group. Then perhaps we will bring stability also to the Caucasus. We'll bring stability to the Central Asian republics, and especially we'll be able to bring stability in the three major choke points which are there in the Western Indian Ocean region, which is the Strait of Hormuz, the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, and even the Mozambique Channel, which is there between Mozambique and Madagascar. Because we have seen when the ships come from the Cape of Good Hope, they get stuck there. We can work together. The Navy already comes and does exercises here. We can work together, and then if we have peace with this country, then we don't have to follow the American strategy. Look, you can't stop the PLA Navy from coming here. But why should we be enemy to them? That's not required. They can be here in the seas and they will be here in the seas. They are a great power. Next, if we stabilize this global south, then what happens is that even our relations with Russia, they will strengthen further. And that is what we need. Russia is we have very good relations, there's no doubt about it. But They will strengthen because Russia also will know that, all right, India is now part of this global south grouping. So the point I am making is that we have not made a course correction as said by Jaishankar. We have done something only to bring the, to build up the stature of the Prime Minister. It does not help our poor people. So we need a course correction to his course correction what he has done. Thank you very much.